All right, so Sarah can thank Zach for reminding me to record, because otherwise I would just go on and that would be bad. So, okay, so we have a takeaway, right? That's a good thing. One of the takeaway being that they were multiply situated, that it's a very complex mangle. It involves really careful kinds of work. Sometimes it can be really emotional, and we don't always have time for it, for everything. And we have to kind of be okay with that a little bit too, right? That it has to be something that is not just, I can't, I'm an okay teacher if I don't reach every single class, every single student in my classes, because that's a lot of students. How many guys do you guys, how many students do you see a day or a week? What's our average number of students you guys see? You got
I see about 120 a
what,
day.
120? 70, Chris, that's good. 144, Lindsay, okay. 152.
We do straight blocks, so I see the same 70 kids every day for a semester. And then I don't see them anymore. So
right.
by the end of the year, I've seen 40 or 120. No, yeah.
You've seen 120 by the end of the year, right?
I guess 140 because that's 70.
140 by the end of the year. Yeah. Okay. So you got these blocks, different kinds. Yeah. Different scheduling, different ways to do that. So, but yeah, somewhere between 100 and 150 it looks like is kind of about right. If we take Chris's 70 and Natasha has a little bit less, but 75-ish for Taya. 75 to 150. That's a lot of people, and they're very, very different. All of them are so different. If you want to tackle questions of diversity, equity, inclusion, think about how different your students are. There's so much difference in every single classroom because every single one of them is situated very differently, right? Right. Tiffany's going to send students over. Okay. Right. They want the student money. Just kidding, not being cynical. But that's there, right? And then I think we can start uncovering that. And I think for me, multiliteracies helps me kind of do that, right? It helps me think about, oh yeah, they're all situated in very different ways. They're also very different. And can I maybe get at a couple of them this semester, because I can think through some of these things, right? So Tiffany, did you have your hand up? I thought somebody had their hand up, but now they don't. No? Or was it Lindsay? I thought somebody had their hand up. Wasn't it you, Natasha? Yeah, it was you.
Yeah, I posted a question in the chat and then you asked the question about the class numbers and it kind of got lost.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Just to clarify though, we could do the music playlist as an extra assignment for this class, or you were wanting us to do that in our own classrooms or both?
So I was simply relating that's a project I did in former classes. Right. I'm just sharing that was, I was trying to find the actual sheet of paper that was what I did, because a playlist and have students annotate it. A lot of students really liked it. And then they would burn CDs, and then it morphed into students were giving me these YouTube videos, YouTube playlists. Right. I was like, so it migrated onto this other thing. So, I mean, it was fascinating little project. I mean, I didn't really do anything with it, but for me, I was just like, this is really fun. Right. I liked those kinds of summative sorts of reflections that students would do. I enjoyed it. It made my life a whole lot better because I wasn't, putting some sort of like arbitrary, these are the standards and I have to measure and make sure that, it was more like, oh, I'm actually learning about my own stuff. And these students are engaged in a very complex, authentic way of communicating, right? Now, Natasha, if that inspires you, run with it, right? Anything I say in here, I think anything we do, when I first started teaching, it was a matter of, what, nobody's, even though there's a lot of intellectual labor, if you think about it, there are some rules that we do need to definitely follow. But as far as I'm concerned, my intellectual labor, you guys use it, change it, do whatever you want with it. I think we should be sharing it, right? I think teaching isn't just an individual, I have an intellectual property because I did this. For me, I think it's like language. It's a social enterprise, right? Like Hillary Clinton said it. Well, no, Hillary Clinton didn't say that. She got it from somewhere else. Where'd she steal it from? Takes a village. Was it Audre Lorde? Why am I failing on this at this moment? Do we know where that's from? It takes a village to raise a child. Where's the origination? Kendra's Googling it. You just look like you're Googling, right? I don't know.
I was Googling.
You're Googling, Lindsay? Did you
Yeah.
find out? Where does that come from? It takes a village to raise a child.
From an
I'm
African
finding it's like a
proverb.
proverb, but yeah.
It's a proverb. Okay, it's an African proverb?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not Audre Lorde, it's an African proverb. It's not
And
Hillary Clinton
it's
either.
the message that it takes many people, aka
Yeah.
the village, to provide a safe, healthy environment for children where children are given the security they need to develop and flourish and to be able to realize their hopes and dreams.
All right, very good. So,
The
So-
the Hillary Clinton connection is, I random Google search, popularized in Western culture in the 1990s when Hillary Clinton published her book, It Takes a Village and Other Lessons Children Teach Us.
all
So,
right.
not totally off base there, it looks like.
Yeah, right. That's another very fascinating. So I would love somebody to do it. I think some people have prodded at this a little bit, so you wouldn't go at it alone. But if somebody wanted to do a project looking at contemporary first ladies and the ways in which education and literacy have been framed as a cause for the work of first ladies, right? Because you have Hillary Clinton, It Takes a Village, What Children Can Teach Us. You have Laura Bush taking on, that was her kind of first lady project. And now you've got Dr. Jill Biden, who is an actual literacy teacher, right? That this has been kind of, it's a trope among first ladies in some sense, right? That it's okay, you know, first ladies, they're supposed to do some stuff for the White House and help the president and whatnot. And there's all kinds of gender roles going in on that. But they have an office, right? First ladies have an office and they're supposed to do some stuff in the White House. And often that stuff is promoting literacy. Yay, right? What's up with that? Right? Okay, so Michelle Obama even had that education, nutrition in the schools, right? Nutritional literacy, I think, is even probably what it is. So yeah, thanks, Zach, right? That's totally, I had forgotten about that. That's true. I'm just saying, like, that's a book that's waiting to be written, right? Kind of being like, why is it women's work? Why can't the president go out and do that? Yeah, politically safe, genderized, with all kinds of stuff you can do with that. So, all right. I digress. What do you guys think of the New London group? What do we really need to pull out of that that reading, and what's important? What do we got on the questions here? Chris and Sarah were saying, how do we ensure differences of cultures, language, and genders are not barriers? Let me share my screen here. I think I did post it in e-learning if folks want to have their own copy. Right? All kinds of good questions here, right? Because it does seem like they're kind of tackling a whole lot, right?
They were only trying to reinvent the wheel, so.
Right, yeah.
That was the gist I got from that. Like, I really found I think I did the second three and Sarah did the first three.
Okay.
But I thought she does mention something about fast capitalism. The things I kind of saw at the beginning were like, education gets progressively more commoditized, and just, nothing's new, because it's a lot of the one I wanted. Trying to find a way to phrase a question that I didn't feel like I was already going to know the answer to, but because like I have one discussion question, it's like, where have we seen the effect of schools trying to be defined exclusively in economic terms, matching the mainstreaming desire, which ultimately becomes detrimental to the goal of education. So
Right.
like this, it's like I think the note I made for myself was like the buzzwording that happens in education that's often centered around the Kagans were mentioned last week, you know, and they were a big deal where I was at in Kansas too. But you know, it's learning engagement or whatever their thing is. And
There's always a new thing, and we have this program to fix that thing.
I just remember, like,
yeah.
I find what buzzword it is. My current administration isn't nearly as bad, but like when I was at Wash, like robust was the big word. Like it was like, all right, here's my robust counter for the day. How many times am I going to hear about making things robust?
Yeah, Kendra's saying rigor, right?
Yes, rigor.
Did you guys go through grit? Did you guys have administration like it's all about grit? We need to get some. Yeah, Tiffany's like, yep, grit's been the word. That's another one. Yep.
And it's just like it gets in its own. Especially around the COVID time, I remember seeing like, what was it that I was reading? I took a note on this too. It's like sometimes the classroom has to imitate family life things, but sometimes when it does that, it also gets in the way of doing those things. Like, so it's like all the football is family shirts or whatever. And it's like, oh, that's like, yes, it's trying to like pull from like this concept of like being there for each other, but like it also sort of quickly becomes this like rallying cry that instead becomes like a toxicity element where it's like, oh, I can't let the team down. And it shows
right.
up
Yeah. Don't ever,
in bad ways.
I hate it when any institution says you're part of the family, because I see how bad family members can be to one another, right? It wasn't until I'm an only child. And so it wasn't until I had 2 children that I realized siblings are shits to each other. Right. And my wife has like, she's got 3 in this country, 3 siblings in this country, and then 5 more back in Australia. So I'm like, you guys are awful. She's like, yeah, we're terrible to each other. Duh. So don't ever be part of a family, not at work. Right? Because that means they're going to be terrible to you. So, but I mean, it's a good question. I like the thinking about to what extent do we need to, I think to address Tiffany's earlier kinds of orientation, we need to prepare students for fast capitalism, but also allow them and give them tools to, perhaps push back against it, right? So let's take that. Let's focus on fast capitalism for a second. Can we define what fast capitalism is?
I put it in with one of the questions that I had because I was like, well, I briefly forgot that everybody was reading the same thing. Because, in previous classes, we've been like chunking things in groups. So I'm like, oh,
okay.
they haven't read this thing. So like, I've got to phrase things in a way like they haven't read it. And
but that's also good. That's also right. That's also really good, though. I want to just say, because that is something that in the written medium, we need that framing. So go ahead.
What I could gather from the article was not a term I was like readily familiar with, but it's a term that seems to carry some inherent meaning. I said keeping up with like the ever-changing, fluctuating cultural landscape in the mainstream. So that's what to make money. That's the capitalism part of it. But it made me think of like, just those general societal expectations. What is that mainstream, the water cooler conversation of TV shows and things, and whether or not a show is like, oh man, that's hitting some wrong vibes here or whatever. And then it kind of can lose popularity pretty quickly, sort of thing. And I don't know if what's the other thing? That's what I've got.
Yeah, hang on. So I'm going to put in a couple titles here that are just, these are kind of other ways in which fast capitalism has sort of been talked about and discussed. Naomi Klein's Disaster Capitalism, if you've read that one, how, it's part of business today to go in and wreck shit so that you can go in and then be the savior and rebuild it and make a profit off of it, right? I think that is really pertinent to what we see going on in a lot of state funding of schools and education, right? As it is deliberately messing things up so that some corporate business entity can come in and say, we have the solution, we have the fix, right? This is and it's not an isolated thing. It's not just a few bad actors. It's deliberate, right? There's also a very highly theoretical piece, Michael Hart, Antonio Negri's Empire, which came out at the turn of the century, which also talks about kind of the global reach of a lot of these corporations and how they kind of transcend a lot of laws, and they're just really there. They're all organized around the flow of money, right? That's really all that's there. And then I'll also kind of show you. I just got this one. So my colleague, I graduated, well, didn't graduate with him, but I was in school at Wisconsin with him, Toward an Anti-Capitalist Composition by James Rushing Daniel, which I'm just reading a little bit now, but writing practice, writing theory, composition studies has long been very concerned with the labor conditions under which teachers work. And so a lot of these kinds of discussions, I don't know what Tiffany was yelling back or smiling about, but you guys got some conversation going on. But a lot of these things, these conversations, what kinds of labor conditions people are working in as part of their teaching or as part of their writing are really, really important, right? So how can we address those? Because your material conditions, there are people. There's a celebrity kind of anti-celebrity case, I guess, where there was a woman in Chicago and she was an adjunct at like 4 different universities, right? She was found dead in her car because she was homeless, right? And she just couldn't scrape together, being unhomed, being always on the driving around, to get to the next gigs just so that she could eat, right? Couldn't find the health care that she needed, like all these kinds of things. Or maybe she wasn't found dead. She was, I think maybe had to go to the hospital or something. I may be overstating it. But anyway, like these kinds of, labor conditions are really important. So thanks, Chris, for putting in. Yeah, there is a Twitter page on fast capitalism. We'll read later on Minzan Liu. Minzan Liu and Bruce Horner used to be at Drake, and then they moved to University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. They were there for a while, and now they're at University of Louisville. Elon, there you go. That's another one where it's part of the capitalist, the rich boy playbook. Go in, ruin some stuff, and then make sure you got people waiting on the wing so they can go in, fix it for a profit, right? Yeah. Right? You want to be a rich boy, kind of. The arrogance of some of them, though, just leaves me flat-footed. I just can't believe the kinds of arrogance that Elon Musk and these others put out. I mean, even Jeff Bezos is just the kinds of errors. Right. Anyway, fast capitalism is the kind of the ubiquity of capitalism that we have today, right? It used to be capitalism was kind of this Fordist model, and you can think of Henry Ford and the production line, right? You're making widgets, and what does it take? We used to gear all of our education around this kind of factory model. What does it take to produce somebody who can work in a factory, helping them make the widgets that make the world go round, and then they go home to their families, and then they spend 40 years, 50 years or whatever making widgets, and then they retire, and that was it. So it was a very constrained, very much a Fordist model of assembly line, specialized. You just specialized, you just this one thing over and over and over and over and over, right? In fast capitalism, that is a more arrangement, an economic arrangement where things can be, it's all plug and play everywhere, right? Where you can switch things out into all kinds of variety of situations depending on the just-in-time systems that we have. That's one reason why the pandemic was kind of so disruptive economically, is because you had, say, the factory and their supply chain stretches out to, China and Vietnam and Mexico. And so they all these threads, these supply chains feeding in, and they're buying just enough product at a constant rate to keep their production going so that they can then ship their things out to wherever that is that they go, right? And so once that stops, all those factories, it's like a chain reaction. It's like a train stopping. When one factory shuts down because of COVID, and then boom, another rams into it, and boom, 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 they all stack up. And then you kind of have to like disentangle the trains a little bit, and they have to kind of get going, right? And then some of the factories have used up all of their stuff, so they got to get a whole new set of supplies in, right? Maybe they even went into their whatever backlog they had. So it's not only a matter of gearing these things up again, it's also a matter of gearing up their supply chains. It's also a matter of that, because of this just-in-time manufacturing system and economy that we have, it is really easy for a business to come and be bought out, basically. And suddenly it's like, you know what, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to pivot and we're going to do this other thing, right? So because companies are parts of conglomerates. So there's not just a sense of like, well, yeah, we always make this. Like, look at Nestle, right? Nestle is not just chocolate. It's trying to privatize water, right? Yeah, I heard some of the nasty things that Nestle does, right? I mean, they get women in some other countries, they get them hooked on infant formula, even though their water in that country is full of cholera and other kinds of bad things. And they get them hooked on using the formula, and then their milk dries up, so they can't naturally feed, but then they have to rely on this dirty water and makes their baby sick, right? And these kinds of things happen with Nestle. And Nestle's been like, well, the solution then is to just, we're gonna start selling the water. We're gonna privatize it, right? It's water. It's not supposed to be privatized. It's supposed to be free, right? It's something that we can't, it's the one thing, like we can go for a while without food, but we can't go very long without water. So, so there's ways in which, and we don't have to deal with the third world countries, but there's ways in which what is it? The average career now, was it up to, you have what, 5 to 10 different careers in your lifetime now? Whereas 50 years ago, you had one. You were trained for the one career, you did the one thing, you did it over. Now you got to be able to shift on a dime. You could be laid off at any minute. You could be suddenly doing something different, or you could, in order to advance, you need to do something else within the company, and you got to be flexible and be able to shift your portfolio over to this other kind of thing, right? Fast capitalism, it's always churning, right? It's not the Fordist model anymore. It's fast, on a dime, just in time stuff. What do we need? What do we need right now? What's the moment, right? And Elon Musk will change if they think that their profit margin will be better doing this other thing rather than this, right? So, so companies do that all the time. Yeah, sorry,
I
I'm
think
going
this
off on a tangent.
last year in,
Well, sorry,
Oh.
Chris.
sorry, a quick aside, like even like the gay pride flag has been very commoditized to the point where, like, I've seen, there were some memes going around last year where it was like all the evil corporations and, movies and TV shows, it's their logo redesigned with the pride flag in it. And it's just like, yep.
Mhm.
It's,
Yeah.
some people are doing it for sales.
Yep, absolutely, right? Yeah, Amanda, you were gonna say something too?
I don't know. Yes and no. I was just thinking about how, like, I don't know, if you're looking to tie in, like, where does secondary ELA specifically fit in with, like, I think it ties back to language of power, right? Which is what we're teaching. Like, that's how it connects to capitalism, or like participation in a democratic society is, yeah, like giving students of different class backgrounds and dialects the opportunity to, like, having that, I don't know, I go back to the ideas of hybridity and intertextuality. I wrote about those I wrote a lot about, like, this for my stuff last semester for Erica. And so this is, like, on the forefront of my mind for what I'm going to do for research, even though I don't know what the heck that is. But I don't know. I don't know.
No, good. Yeah, you're right. It ties into, I mean, literacy. This is one of the things that we'll not only get this with Minzon Liu, who talks about fast capitalism in the writing classroom, but we'll also look at how, one of my dissertation advisors, Deb Brandt, talks about, investigates literacy as a tradable commodity, right? It is a good that can be used and bartered and figuring into what's your value. Right. So there's a way in which, yes, showing or demonstrating certain literacies or being able to talk about certain literacies certainly has economic power behind it, right? Is entangled with it. It's not separate. So, that can have literal consequences for the material conditions of your students, and sooner rather than later, right? Could have material conditions for you. So good. There's ways in which there are all kinds of ways in which labor and capital really alienates people from their labor. And that's kind of the point. Of course, you don't want to say these things too loud, because then suddenly you're a Marxist and your school board frowns on you. Like, what do you think you're doing? Why are you teaching that? So you kind of have to be like, okay, but let's just look at money, and let's just look at standards of living and career aspirations and things like that, and how, as I tell my tech comms to my technical communication students, I'm like, literacy here is a core skill, right? It's not something that you just kind of are like, yeah, I'll figure it out, or it's just part of something I need to do because OSHA requires documentation. It's really core. We're looking at NTSB reports of plane crashes right now. Most of those NTSB reports pretty much finger a breakdown in communication somewhere along the line, right? Whether it's with the engineers or the maintenance crew. The engineers, first of all, so look at the 737 MAX fiasco with Boeing. That was a miscommunication between management and engineers. Engineers just could not get management to think any other way. You look at Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. That was, again, management was not listening to the engineers. It could be the grounds crew, the maintenance folks who forget to document or forget to pay attention, or to forget to note, to log in what things happen, or it is just pilot error, right? That's the cause of most of the disasters that we see. That's true in plane crashes, bridge disasters, transportation accidents, all kinds of things. It's mostly miscommunication. So these things are core skills, core literacies. So, all right. Do you guys want to talk more about capitalism or not? Chris, did you have anything else to add to the fast capitalism question? He maybe had to go. Right. Something could be on, yes, attend to kids or something. But so we know so that's fast capitalism. We understand that, right? The ways in which we imagine the economic conditions in which we work and in which our students will work, whether they're going on to an apprenticeship, whether they're going on to the military, whether they're going on to VOTEC, whether they're going on to college. I mean, kids are going all over the place, right? So how can you think about the ways in which the ways in which we might be teaching them to be a commodity rather than a human being? I think that's really important, but also the ways in which they can navigate that system of constant change, constant churn, and literal disasters caused. Katrina was some of the best news for lots of people. Hurricane Katrina back in the day, right? Because, man, look at all that opportunity. You can rebuild stuff. Dollar signs start flashing in people's heads, right? So can they have the ethical wherewithal to negotiate some of this stuff is just huge. So and my own area of research too, looking at how the global climate change and global climate disaster is looming ever more present toward us. And again, are we going to be able to move out of the way fast enough, right? I mean, it's a huge question. So, so again, multiliteracies allows us a window onto it, not the only one, but certainly a window. And lots of people have been following that tradition in some of these things. So, all right. So that was the fast capitalism. Do we have any other questions on fast capitalism? Because that was in a couple. That's life after, not just preparing for life after high school, but for many lives, maybe, right? We're maybe less citizens than capitalist workers, right? In some sense, even in your citizenry, right? You're supposed to be a good taxpayer. You should pay your fair share, right? It becomes an economic equation where if you're not paying in, you're leeching from the state. But a lot of those people making that argument are the ones who are leeching from the state, right? I'm looking at some of those states that don't contribute to the overall, you know, they take more in federal dollars than they give, right? All kinds of ways in which there's literacies there. So, Chris, did you have anything to add on fast capitalism?
Yeah, sorry to bail on my own discussion. For a brief second, my babysitter is heading out, so it's just.
Yeah, I figured what happened. I thought you had something about kids. So, yeah, I understand. We'll come back to this, right? We have Minzon Liu, we have Deb Brand. We'll look at some of the
Are we
economic
preparing
conditions.
students for a world in which they can be creative? Are we leading them to fast capitalism, which kind of sounds like what you were just talking about? Like,
so, but I mean, I guess, yeah, that's an important point. We can't not lead them to fast capitalism. Fast capitalism is already here, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
Right. It is just sort of the state of things. And so, yeah, what do we do? That's part of the situatedness.
The other,
here we are.
Speaking of buzzwords that drive me up the walls that relate to this, it's the let's make the kids creators, not consumers. And it's just like it's a cycle. Like if they're all creators, then the whole system doesn't matter, right? So like, and are they not?
But can't they be more informed consumers?
Yeah, I remember hearing that a lot growing up, like being an informed consumer. I remember hearing that a lot.
But again, it kind of points back. That's the same sort of situation in fast capitalism. Is can they make the ethical decision to maybe tell some, you know, to maybe not work for Nestle, because Nestle, you know, or on a project that maybe is, you know, taking advantage of other people, of moms trying to nurse their babies, right? Simply for profit margin, right? Are they able to distinguish? Are they able to recognize that? Do they have the literacies to, you know, because nobody's going to tell them that, right? Outright, right? It's not like they're evil, right? There's usually like, well, we have to value shareholders. That's who we work for, right? And so all other considerations aside, literature, English teaching, the English classroom is a great place to start instilling ethics, right? And some sense of, you know, how do we relate? You know, we were just talking before the break, you know, that there's certain relations that are enacted, right? Yeah, so Deborah, yeah, don't look up, right? Some of these kinds of things that are like, you know, don't keep your blinders on. That's part of a critical literacy job, is to kind of bust through some of these bubbles a little bit, right? You're not going to totally save the world. You're not going to totally do things. It's sometimes a struggle just to get them to copy Google, right? However, there are a few students in there, and sometimes that's all it takes. It's just a few to say, yeah, I'm passionate about this, or I care, or I want to at least talk to an adult somewhere about it, and that adult could be you, right? I mean, I know certainly. So a little bit of my own background is like I grew up in Tampa, Florida. Like I was a big city, you know, South Coast with a U.S. kid, you know, suburban. I mean, it was suburban bliss, right? The ultimate suburban privilege, all that kind of stuff. And then when I was 14, my parents said, well, we're moving to Waseca, Minnesota, population 8,000, southern Minnesota. I was not happy for a couple of years there. But if it wasn't for some of the teachers, especially one, getting involved in theater, and then two, having some teachers who were able to really engage with me on an authentic level, I mean, I could have been really lost, right? Because Waseca, Minnesota, it's probably like a lot of small Iowa towns. It's southern Minnesota. It's basically, it's basically an extension of Iowa. You don't think outside the box too much, right? And here I am coming in from outside with all these other weird ideas and oriented in different ways, and all this kind of stuff. And in among my peers, I was like this exotic kid, one person who a couple years older and was like, who's this? I was talking to her. She said, I always wondered who this kid was coming in wearing these, wearing shoes without socks. Like, what kind of person does that, right? So be that adult, be the adult that maybe somebody can talk to, right? Maybe that's all it is. So getting heavy. There's an emotional undertow to all of this stuff, right? Other things that we felt. What else is really important in this multiliteracies piece? We don't have to be openly, anti-capitalist, not like James Daniel is, but it's a good read so far. It makes some good points. Material conditions do matter. We all need a raise because inflation is crazy. But I live like a king because I have chickens. I don't have to go buy eggs. Finally see Clement laugh. There you go. Right on. Right? I mean, all these are the things that matter. They seem like mundane kind of stuff, and like, well, we don't have to be concerned with it, but it really is. It's part of the situation in which students find themselves. So what can we as teachers do? How do we reach them? In what ways are they using literacies to survive their own conditions? Some of them flourishing, some of them struggling, some of them doing a bit of both. Isn't that what kind of comes down to? How do you guys do it in your classrooms? Do you enact any of this stuff in your classes?
I think there was a really interesting, in a way that I never really thought of before, that like teaching the communication of that like fast capitalist working environment is not just like the soft skill or employability skill that maybe it's labeled in our department right now.
Is that how you guys are talking about it, as a soft skill?
Well, I mean, like, I think when we talk to teachers in other content areas, it's like one of those things that we get to like effectively grade because it's like our discussion stand, but like how formal or successful that is maybe like conceptualized a little bit different in terms of like how we might actually, or what I might be like looking for when I assess it. So then when I read this and thought about like, obviously it's very important, and like talk about like a post-pandemic deficit of like just getting kids to talk to one another is like like if we can do it, I walk out of the room being like, I'm the best teacher in the room. So thinking through, because a lot of my approach to that section, I kept thinking about like how I always have these really annoying conversations with people, mainly my husband, who works in like a corporate environment. And when you're a career teacher, and I've only been doing this for the past 14 years, so like I've sort of lost sight of like what the quote unquote real world needs of my students. And I think that whereas I may have I mean, I utilize a lot of that, like collaboration and negotiation, and like the whole idea of when, you know, in group work, where if you're the kind of kid that like does the whole thing, you have failed at collaboration. And then they're like, but like the ways in which, so like in my head, I'm like looking for some like discrete thing that like I can do to help them be more technical readers, or like I don't know what the real world needs them to be, but that like just focusing on some of those skills of like, no, you work with this person because like you're assigned to make the best of it.
Yeah, sometimes you just gotta.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And yeah, Chris and Zach, I think you were chiming in. You get some, you know, again, I think you're responding to Anna's point about the post-pandemic deficits, right? Kids are quiet, they don't really want to engage. Anna's talking too about how sometimes like, well, what does their life in the future entail, and what's that going to be, right? And I'll just follow up that I have been teaching for a long time under the assumption that I don't know what new technologies my students are going to use and encounter. And so even though we're doing professional and technical writing and document design and stuff, I'm like, what I tell you today could be totally different tomorrow. I have no idea. Right. So Lindsay, you had your hand up, but now it's down. So no, you're good. Right. So Chris, what you're saying here in the chat, you got your PLC. What am I lost it there. You know, just tell folks.
Yeah. So yeah, I was thinking like, so I also think about that too. It's like, okay, well, you know, our teaching job, you know, that is our real world, you know, and school is real world to them too, but you get to give them the kind of sandbox environment that they won't necessarily have, you know, in adulthood. So it's like, you know, when my PLC is working best, we're able to discuss with each other on the same level, be able to expect each other to follow through. We have to work with different sets of expectations for how to achieve a common goal. So when I try and do collaborative activities, I really try and stress those things. And I just tell it to them how it is with the teachers I work with at school. And because I, you know, largely respect them, but we obviously have different opinions on things because we're from different schools or different generations or different mindsets. So, you know, basically just, you know, make the real world out of it, because that is what they do. Yeah.
Right. And it is, I mean, we're always kind of in the position that we don't always know what's beyond, what's the future is for our students, right? We have to do what we have to do, I think, is help them make the real world, right? You might want to note, you know, the subtitle here is designing social futures, right? So there's a way in which multiliteracies is always sort of couched as this kind of, you know, it takes a village and we're raising the future, right? And we're raising a kind of a future for change, right? To respond to today's current problems, hopefully in ways that can redesign, quite literally, the available designing process and redesign it could be just very little and very kind of minor in terms of now my understanding, you know, I took the available designs about what Shakespeare was, and I got some instruction and critical reframing, whatever, so I could do the design work so that I could redesign an understanding of Shakespeare as fun and really kind of cool and you know, helps me be knowledgeable. Or it could also be this really big, you know, the overall project is we as educators are teaching the next generations. We don't know exactly what they're going to need because we can't see the future. Nobody can, but we can give them a set of tools by which they can encounter problems and hopefully meet those problems rather than fail around and going like, well, nobody told us what to do about this, right? Now, in high school and even in college, they're going to be very much like, well, you never told me what to do about it. But I think that entails a little change of instruction, a little change of kind of as we're saying, really getting into their situation. And they're still going to resist it a little bit because they want the easy way. They want to just tell me the recipe on how to do this. But I keep pushing my students and being like, no, I'm never going to give that to you. I'm never going to tell you exactly what I want because I don't always know. And we don't always know what the future is. But if you can talk to me about why you did what you did and how that helped you meet your goals, I think we're on to something. See the shift in emphasis there that it kind of takes. So I get dinged even on my teaching evaluations in my department head, and I butt heads over how those teaching evaluations are and are not helpful, because I don't tell students. I'm like, I'm not going to tell you exactly what I want. You can saw that in my syllabus, right? Is no, you have to tell me. Did it, and students think my class is disorganized, and maybe you guys think so too. I don't know, but you got to tell me what you think is really important. It's one reason I'm having you do this research proposal. Is not, I'm not going to grade it like, here's how you write a proposal, but have you tell me what you think is an interesting way to study something, because I really want to know what you guys want to study. Right? You're going to come in with a different sensibility than I am. So I want you to be able to explain that to me. And if you can explain it to me, you can explain it to Dr. Bass, Dr. Benson, Dr. Zigarovich. I don't know who else you all have had, but Dr. Husband, right? You'll be able to explain it to them too. So hopefully it's useful. Make some sense. I feel like I end up taking up too much of the airwaves, but okay, 809. Other thing, any last minute points, anything that somebody's just burning to get off? I know it's getting late, we're tired, right? Amanda's making me sleepy. I'm like, yeah, I need a couch. I need to teach from my couch, man. Like, this is cool, right? And Taya's got that comfy looking chair. I'm like, I need something like that, right? But this chair isn't too bad. My wife actually, no, my mom got me this chair. It wasn't my wife. Careful what I say. So it's better than the one I used to have. So, all right, your daughter's explaining an issue. Yeah, right. And daughter's gonna have it. So if you could take that, I understand. So, other things though in multiliteracies that are important. Certainly, there's a lot there, right? But the way I structured the class is we spent the last couple weeks kind of getting the background, right? Introduce and kind of background, really that Vygotskian sensibility, and he's been huge. Vygotsky's just been a huge influence. Vygotsky's circle, I should say, mostly through, if you guys know this is one that I had to read from my comps. It was actually in my literacy class with Deb Brandt. Psychology of Literacy with Michael Cole and Sylvia Scribner and Michael Cole. This really introduced, because it was really kind of a work of both psychology and anthropology, psychological anthropology, which really introduced Vygotskian activity theory to Western audiences, right? So Michael Cole he was a director at the Center for Literacy at University of San Diego for a long time, and he really got it out. And it's been very influential in psychology, in English, in education, in anthropology, sociology. Trying to think where else he really, oftentimes in business, because when we get to Lave and Wenger, they take up limited peripheral participation and do that in terms of mentorship, but they developed all of this within a corporate business context at Xerox, right? So it's professional management studies, all these things. Like, it's just, it's just there. The new literacy studies that Michael Street introduces, that dovetails with the stuff of activity theory and Vygotskian kind of sensibilities. And that's really the background to then what comes on later is this multiliteracies. And so now we actually look at it, and the rest of the semester, if you look at the syllabus, let me just share my screen here a little bit. If you look at the rest of the syllabus, it really is just kind of going through, where is my syllabus here? Like, topically goes through various dimensions of, right, here's our background, various various dimensions of what they lay out here in this pedagogy of multiliteracies, right? So we'll look at, you know, the teaching, how does it affect teaching? How does it affect the other equation that we often don't often address is not just the teaching, but what happens, what's the learning, what's going on, how do people learn, right? We might know how to teach, but does our teaching connect up with how people learn? That's a huge question, right? We'll have that kind of resituating when we think about that. So we'll spend quite a bit of time on the learning. We have modalities in here, that there's different modalities in which literacies happen, that we'll get into things like wampum as hypertext, Angela Haas's piece, which is, you know, indigenous rhetorics going on in there. You know, what is multimodal composition? We'll look at design, design features, both in terms of professional and technical writing, as well as kind of the design, available design, redesign, those kinds of things. We have our spring break then we get, here we go, Minzon Liu, fast capitalism, just like we were talking about. And Deb Brandt's Writing for a Living. Again, it's the economic power, which we'll follow up with the power of it. This isn't necessarily new multiliteracies, but Deb Brandt's notion of sponsorship, I think, is a really huge piece in here, because it's like the Levin Wenger, it's like the mentorship. It's kind of like teaching, and we'll come back around and kind of scaffold up into how sponsorship is, you know, if writing for a living, if one can make a living, if it is a tradable commodity, sorry, then what does that do? How does that work on an economic scale, right? So, but we'll also look at, you know, I love this one here, re-envisioning writing pedagogic and learning disabilities through a Black girls literacies framework, right? We'll look at the ways in which those that were marginalized in economics, socioeconomic contexts, are really important, right? Minzon Liu, by the way, is coming, fast capitalism. She doesn't write about it in here, but she's coming from a Chinese background, so Taiwanese background. And then we've got, of course, you know, following that, how do we assess that, right? That's going to be huge. You know, this confounds assessment in a lot of ways, as we've touched on already. Like, what do we do in order to assess? How do we do that? Tiffany's point. Well, at some point, people are going to judge you on things. Do we assess how people will judge them in the future, or do we assess where they are? Like, what do we do with that? I'm also putting in, because this is kind of my research area right now, but decolonization, ways in which, if we follow from Angela Haas's work on different literacies in different cultural contexts, what do we do with, for example, wampum? What do we do with different notions of, you know, indigenous literacies? How do we get them so that they're included rather than excluded? Because oftentimes an indigenous identity, they're characterized as identity, or they're identified as indigenous because they're not literate, right? They borrowed the literacy from the European colonizers, but that's not true, right? So what do we do with that? So, and then we'll kind of end here a little bit. We'll first get into some multiliteracy projects, what they look like. So Eli Goldblatt and David Jolliffe. David Jolliffe is just retiring now from University of Arkansas. Eli Goldblatt is at Temple. So there's 2 chapters from their co-authored book that we'll read, which kind of show, and they work. Jolliffe is always, he's been the National Writing Project person at University of Arkansas. So he is very, very integrated with Arkansas communities, and especially Arkansas K-12 education. So that, again, you know, Amanda really wants in the secondary context, well, make sure I'm getting it right. And then we'll kind of see some literacies of reflection, and that's just a quick little counterpoint kind of thing that Kathleen Yancey talks about reflection, but then Casey Boyle says, well, what if you think of it just a slightly different way? And that will get us, you notice the reading gets less. That's more time for you guys to sort of take over as we progress through this stuff. But all we're going to do is now unpack this one essay, right? That's really the rest of the semester is unpacking this one essay, A Pedagogy of Multiliteracies, right? Did you think that one whole class could be about one whole essay? Yeah, maybe, possibly, right? All right. So hopefully that's transparent for you guys, and you can kind of then see what we're doing. And again, yeah, don't read what I wrote there as you have to do all 7 of those or all 10 of those extra things. Pick one. You could pick a couple though too. I mean, that's why it's written the way it is like you could do one and then do another and be like, yeah, I want to, I can explore around a little bit. And they just give you kind of extra bonus points, right? Maybe you had to miss a whole lot, something happened, right? And you weren't able to do a lot of the work. And so you really need to kind of play catch up. Well, this allows you to play catch up and then maybe still get an A because you can do it, right? So Amanda, did you have any question on that? I saw you were about to speak, but maybe I cut you off. Okay. All right.
I was just like, whoo, thank goodness.
No, you guys, as I began this whole, today's lesson, as I listened to what you guys talk about, and as you talk about your work with one another, I see that you guys are doing so much smart stuff. And I think what really is going on is that, and hopefully Tess is doing this, the Tess program is doing this, is helping you give name to some things you're already doing, right? Because by giving name, you give some power to it. And you're like, no, that's what that is. That's really, yeah, that's really important. Or now I have a term for it. I have a conceptual hook so that I can be a better teacher, so I can be more reflective. I can be a better PLC member. I can dialogue with my administration to further our curriculum, whatever it is that you're doing, whatever part or aspect of that work it is, giving name to it. Hopefully that's kind of what we're doing. Make some sense? All right. And I know you guys have I don't know if you guys are on the separate chat that you guys all have with each other. And it's fine. You don't have to put me on that extra separate chat. I don't know that I want to be on it, right? But I do see the laughing, and laughing's good. So so hopefully you're making connect. Hopefully you're not I'm not taking it that you're laughing at me. And hopefully I'm not, but certainly after hearing that some of you guys might think that you had to do all that stuff, I'm not just a little like self-conscious at the moment. So but I'm glad we clarified that. So Zach's private plane. Okay. Zach, you have a private, when do we get to fly on this thing? I can drive to Waterloo Airport. You landed.
He's gonna fight his 3 brothers for it though first.
Oh, he's got some brothers to fight. All right.
Because there's only 4 seats and his dad has to fly it.
Nice.
Because you said siblings were horrible to each other, so that's
you're still doing the siblings thing. Yeah. Oh, this is great. Yeah. I was an only child. I missed out on all of this fun stuff, man. Right? Yeah. I thought families were nice and harmonious and everything was just hunky-dory, but no. Right? You fight each other for planes. It's like a death match between Zach and his brothers. So thank you for letting me in on the joke, Tiffany. This is really awesome. I'm happy. So last minute concluding thoughts. Anything we want to end with? Now, on where I began, I think you guys are doing really, I hear you talking about stuff and I hear it, I'm making connections like that's multiliteracies. That's doing what it says. So if at the very least you just get names and concepts to this stuff, that's really cool. For next week though, as you read, again, keep the stuff in the background, keep the video. We don't need to go into it because it's just Mary Kalantzis and Bill Cope just talking more about what multiliteracies really is. And Mary sometimes is hard to listen to because she just doesn't lecture well, but she's got it's a Brisbane accent. But anyway, it's a whole book. It's basically there in video series, right? Use it as you will. It's a great resource. You can learn a lot from it. So rather than reading a book, you can watch it on YouTube. Pretty simple. But we'll really tackle teaching next week. So think about that, how you teach it, how this could be that not just ELA, but it could be something that could be interdepartmental, right? How might you bring this out to your colleagues in science, your colleagues who are teaching shop, who are teaching the FFA classes, who are whatever it is, right? Math, In what ways can this be broadened out into that? And then we'll also look at foodway literacies, right? Stephen Albers' taco literacies, which is a fun little, it's a college class he did at University of Kentucky. How might we just, bring these cultures in and have students share food? We should probably have our own food maybe. So this will be a surprise to Sarah because it's a surprise to me that I'm even going to say it. Why don't we at least bring in a recipe, or maybe even show through the Zoom a dish? It's over dinner time. Think about a dish. We'll talk about a particular recipe or a dish that we prepare for class, and we'll talk about the literacies of that food. What do you think? I think that sounds fun. Even if it's a bag of chips and some queso you get at Hy-Vee, still you can talk about the literacies there, right? Oreos, Tiffany's got the bag. Do you know they have these things that it's like called like ultimates, no, not ultimate, like the everything Oreo. It's like the ultimate stuff Oreo. I just saw it at Hy-Vee. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I forget what it's called, but I think it's not just double. It's like they filled it with the stuff as much as they could. All right, and milk or not milk? Is a taco a sandwich or not? These are important questions. We'll tackle them next week. Sound good? All right. Have a great week. I don't know who's going it, but I'll try to get those questions posted next week earlier than I did this time. So, but yeah, again, you guys are great teachers. Have a fine week. We're halfway through winter. Things are looking up. Taya's daughter is going to be a part of this class by the end of it. I just know it. She's going to get a graduate degree too, along with her mom. So it'll be great. I'll see you guys next week. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye.